Hello and welcome to our video, summarizing all you need to know about the major gods of Hinduism. This video is really useful, especially if you're studying or interested in theological and religious studies. So let's get started. India is home to 1.4 billion people, almost 1/6 of the world's population, who belong to a variety of ethnicities and religions. While 94% of the world's Hindus live in India, there are also substantial populations of Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, and followers of folk religions. For most Indians, faith is an extremely important part of their identity. According to a 2015 survey by the Pew Research Center, 8 in 10 Indians said religion is very important to them. Moving on to some important facts. India's massive population includes not only the vast majority of the world's Hindus, but also the second largest group of Muslims within a single country, behind only Indonesia. By 2050, India's Muslim population will grow to 311 million, making it the largest Muslim population in the world, according to Pew Research Center projections. Still, Indian Muslims are projected to remain a minority in their country, making up about 18% of the total population at mid-century, while Hindus figure to remain a majority, that is, about 77%. India is a religiously pluralistic and multi-ethnic democracy, the largest in the world. Its constitution provides for freedom of conscience and the right to profess, practice, and propagate religion. It has protections for minorities against discrimination on the grounds of religion or caste, that is, a strict social stratification based on Hinduism. In 1976, the constitution was amended, officially making the country a secular state. At the same time, a directive in the constitution prohibits the slaughter of cows and animals Hindus hold sacred, which each state has the authority to enforce. Currently, 21 out of 29 states have prison sentences for the act. While there are legal protections for religious groups and minorities, Indians still generally experience high levels of government restrictions on religion, according to an annual Pew Research Center study. There are legal restrictions on religious conversions in at least 6 states that have at times been used to arrest and intimidate Muslims and Christians who proselytize, according to the US Commission on International Religious Freedom. Additionally, Buddhists, Jains, and Sikhs are legally considered Hindus and are unable to access social services or employment and educational preferences available to other religious minority groups. Meanwhile, Christians and Muslims who identify as low-class Dalits, some of whom are descendants of Hindu Dalits who converted to escape caste discrimination, are restricted from accessing educational and employment benefits traditionally reserved for Hindu Dalits. Despite these restrictions, India's Supreme Court has upheld protections for minorities in some religious freedom cases. Moving on to Hinduism, the majority religion in India. Hinduism, major world religion originating on the Indian subcontinent and comprising several and varied systems of philosophy, belief, and ritual. The Indus Valley civilization was the earliest source of these traditions, making Hinduism the world's oldest living religion on earth. Its many sacred texts, like the Vedas in Sanskrit and vernacular languages, served as a vehicle for spreading the religion to other parts of the world, though ritual and visual and performing arts also played a significant role in its transmission. From about the 4th century CE, Hinduism had a dominant presence in Southeast Asia, one that would last for more than 1,000 years. In the early 21st century, Hinduism had nearly 1 billion adherents worldwide and was the religion of about 80% of India's population. Today, with about 900 million followers, Hinduism is the third largest religion behind Christianity and Islam. Despite its global presence, however, it is best understood through its many distinctive regional manifestations. Starting with the history of Hinduism, the earliest literary source for the history of Hinduism is the Rig Veda, consisting of hymns that were composed chiefly during the last 2 or 3 centuries of the second millennium BC. The religious life reflected in this text is not that of contemporary Hinduism, but of an earlier sacrificial religious system, referred to by scholars as Brahmanism or Vedism, which developed in India among Indo-European speaking peoples. Scholars from the period of British colonial rule postulated that this branch of a related group of nomadic and semi-nomadic tribal peoples, originally inhabiting the steppe country of southern Russia and Central Asia, brought with them the horse and chariot and the Sanskrit language. These scholars further averred that other branches of these peoples penetrated into Europe, bringing with them the Indo-European languages that developed into the chief language groups now spoken there. The Vedic people were in close contact with the ancestors of the Iranians, as evidenced by similarities between Sanskrit and earlier surviving Iranian languages. Thus, the religion of the Rig Veda contains elements from 3 strata: an element common to most of the Indo-European groups, an element held in common with early Iranians, and an element appearing only in the Indian subcontinent. Hinduism arose from multiple sources and from the geniuses of individual reformers in all periods. Even in the earlier parts of the Rig Veda, however, the religion displays numerous Indian features that are not evident in Indo-Iranian traditions. Some of the chief gods, for example, have no clear Indo-European or Indo-Iranian counterparts. For example, some scholars attribute non-Vedic features of Hinduism to a people who are often vaguely and incorrectly called Dravidian, a term that refers to a family of languages and not as an ethnic group. The term Hinduism became familiar as a designator of religious ideas and practices distinctive to India with the publication of books such as Hinduism in 1877 by Sir Monier Williams, the notable Oxford scholar and author of an influential Sanskrit dictionary. Initially, it was an outsider's term, building on centuries-old usages of the word Hindu. Early travelers to the Indus Valley, beginning with the Greeks and Persians, spoke of its inhabitants as Hindu, in Greek, Indoi, and in the 16th century, residents of India themselves began very slowly to employ the term to distinguish themselves from the Turks. Gradually, the distinction became primarily religious rather than ethnic, geographic, or cultural. Since the late 19th century, Hindus have reacted to the term Hinduism in several ways. Some have rejected it in favor of indigenous formulations. Others have preferred Vedic religion, using the term Vedic to refer not only to the ancient religious texts known as the Vedas, but also to a fluid corpus of sacred words in multiple languages and an orthoprax, traditionally sanctioned way of life. Still others have chosen to call the religion Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal law, a formulation made popular in the 19th century and emphasizing the timeless elements of the tradition that are perceived to transcend local interpretations and practice. Finally, others, perhaps the majority, have simply accepted the term Hinduism or its analogues, especially Hindu Dharma, Hindu moral and religious law, in various Indic languages. Key beliefs in Hinduism. Sanatana Dharma. Hinduism embraces many religious ideas. For this reason, it's sometimes referred to as a way of life or a family of religions, as opposed to a single organized religion. This expansiveness is made possible by the widely shared Hindu view that truth or reality cannot be encapsulated in any creedal formulation, a perspective expressed in the Hindu prayer, "May good thoughts come to us from all sides." Thus, Hinduism maintains that truth must be sought in multiple sources, not dogmatically proclaimed. When Hindus speak of their religious identity as Sanatana Dharma, they emphasize its continuous, seemingly eternal Sanatana existence, and the fact that it describes a web of customs, obligations, traditions, and ideals, dharma, that far exceeds the Western tendency to think of religion primarily as a system of beliefs. Most forms of Hinduism are henotheistic, which means they worship a single deity known as Brahman, but still recognize other gods and goddesses. Followers believe there are multiple paths to reaching their god: karma, samsara, and moksha. Hindus generally accept the doctrine of transmigration and rebirth and the complementary belief in karma, the universal law of cause and effect. The whole process of rebirth, called samsara, the continuous cycle of life, death, and reincarnation, is cyclic, with no clear beginning or end, and encompasses lives of perpetual serial attachments. Actions generated by desire and appetite bind one's spirit, jiva, to an endless series of births and deaths. Desire motivates any social interaction, particularly when involving sex or food, resulting in the mutual exchange of good and bad karma. In one prevalent view, the very meaning of salvation is emancipation, moksha, from this morass, an escape from the impermanence that is an inherent feature of mundane existence. In this view, the only goal is the one permanent and eternal principle, the one God, Brahman, which is totally opposite to phenomenal existence. People who have not fully realized that their being is identical with Brahman are thus seen as deluded. Dharma. Hindus thus strive to achieve dharma, which is a code of living that emphasizes good conduct and morality. The Bhagavad Gita, Song of God, an extremely influential Hindu text, presents three paths to salvation: the path of ritual action or path of duties, the disinterested discharge of ritual and social obligations; second, the path of knowledge, the use of meditative concentration preceded by long and systematic ethical and contemplative training to gain a super-intellectual insight into one's identity with Brahman; third, Bhakti Marga, the path of devotion, love for a personal God. These ways are regarded as suited to various types of people, but they are interactive and potentially available to all. Atman Brahman. Most Hindus believe in Brahman, an uncreated, eternal, infinite, transcendent, and all-embracing principle. Brahman contains in itself both being and non-being, and it is the sole reality, the ultimate cause, foundation, source, and goal of all existence. As the All, Brahman either causes the universe and all beings to emanate from itself, transforms itself into the universe, or assumes the appearance of the universe. Brahman is in all things and is the self, Atman, of all living beings. Brahman is the creator, preserver, or transformer, and reabsorber of everything. One of the key thoughts of Hinduism is Atman, or the belief in soul. This philosophy holds that living creatures have a soul, and they're all part of the Supreme Soul. The goal is to achieve moksha, or salvation, which ends the cycle of rebirths to become part of the Absolute Soul. Hindus revere all living creatures and consider the cow a sacred animal. Food is an important part of life for Hindus. Most don't eat beef or pork, and many are vegetarians. Hinduism is closely related to other Indian religions, including Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism. 5 strands in Hinduism. Doctrine. The first of the 5 strands of Hinduism is doctrine, as expressed in a vast textual tradition anchored in the Veda, knowledge, the oldest core of Hindu religious utterance, and organized through the centuries primarily by members of the learned Brahmin class. The Vedas address several characteristic tensions concerning the relationship between the divine and the world. Another tension concerns the disparity between the world-preserving ideal of dharma and that of moksha, release from an inherently flawed world. A third tension exists between individual destiny as shaped by karma, the influence of one's actions on one's present and future lives, and the individual's deep bonds to family, society, and divinities associated with these concepts. The second strand in Hinduism, practice. Despite India's enormous diversity, a common grammar of ritual behavior connects various places, strata, and periods of Hindu life. While it is true that various elements of Vedic ritual survive in modern practice and thereby serve a unifying function, much more influential commonalities appear in the worship of icons or images. Broadly, this is called puja, or honoring the deity. If performed in a temple by a priest, it is called archana. It echoes conventions of hospitality that might be performed for an honored guest, especially the giving and sharing of food. Such food is called prasada, meaning grace, reflecting the recognition that when human beings make offerings to deities, the initiative is not really theirs. They are actually responding to the generosity that bore them into a world fecund with life and possibility. The divine personality, installed in a home or temple, receives prasada. Tasting it, Hindus differ as to whether this is a real or symbolic act, gross or subtle, and offering the remains to worshippers. Some Hindus also believe that prasada is infused with the grace of the deity to whom it is offered. Consuming these leftovers, worshippers accept their status as being inferior to and dependent upon the divine. An element of tension arises because the logic of puja and prasada seems to accord all humans an equal status with respect to God. Yet exclusionary rules have sometimes been sanctified rather than challenged by prasada-based ritual. Society. The third strand that has served to organize Hindu life is society. Early visitors to India from Greece and China, and later others such as the Persian scholar and scientist Al-Biruni, who travelled to India in the early 11th century, was struck by the highly stratified social structure that has come to be called familiarly the caste system. While it is true that there is a vast disparity between the ancient vision of society as divided into four ideal classes or varnas and the contemporary reality of thousands of endogamous birth groups, few would deny that Indian society is notably plural and hierarchical. This fact has much to do with an understanding of truth or reality as being similarly plural and multi-layered, though it is not clear whether the influence has proceeded chiefly from religious doctrine to society or vice versa. Seeking its own answer to this conundrum, a well-known Vedic hymn describes how, at the beginning of time, the primordial person, Purusha, underwent a process of sacrifice that produced a four-part cosmos and its human counterpart, a four-part social order comprising Brahmins, priests, Kshatriyas, warriors and nobles, Vaishyas, commoners, and Shudras, the servants. Narrative. Another dimension drawing Hindus into a single community of discourse is narrative. For at least 2 millennia, people in almost all corners of India and now well beyond have responded to stories of divine play and of interactions between gods and humans. These stories concern major figures in the Hindu pantheon: Krishna and his lover Radha, Rama and his wife Sita and brother Lakshmana, Shiva and his consort Parvati, and the great goddess Durga or Devi as a slayer of the buffalo demon Mahisasura. Often such narratives illustrate the interpenetration of the divine and human spheres, with deities such as Krishna and Rama entering entirely into the human drama. Many tales focus in different degrees on genealogies of human experience, forms of love, and the struggle between order and chaos, or between duty and play. In generating, performing, and listening to these stories, Hindus have often experienced themselves as members of a single imagined family. Devotion. There is a fifth strand that contributes to the unity of Hindu experience through time. Bhakti, sharing or devotion, a broad tradition of a loving God that is especially associated with the lives and words of vernacular poet saints throughout India. Devotional poems attributed to these inspired figures, who represent both genders and all social classes, have elaborated a store of images and moods to which access can be had in a score of languages. Bhakti verse first appeared in Tamil in South India and moved northward into other regions with different languages. Individual poems are sometimes strikingly similar from one language or century to another, without there being any trace of mediation through the pan-Indian, distinctly upper caste language Sanskrit. Often, individual motifs in the lives of Bhakti poet saints also bear strong family resemblances. With its central affirmation that religious faith is more fundamental than rigidities of practice or doctrine, Bhakti provides a common challenge to other aspects of Hindu life. At the same time, it contributes to a common Hindu heritage, even a common Hindu heritage of protest. Yet certain expressions of Bhakti are far more confrontational than others in their criticism of caste, image worship, and the performance of vows, pilgrimages, and acts of self-mortification. Holy books. The primary sacred texts, known as the Vedas, were composed around 1500 BC. This collection of verses and hymns was written in Sanskrit and contains revelations received by ancient saints and sages. Veda is also regarded as the basis of all the later Shastra texts, which stress the religious merits of the Brahmins, including, for example, the medical corpus known as Ayurveda. Parts of the Veda are quoted in essential Hindu rituals, such as the wedding ceremony, and it is the source of many enduring patterns of Hindu thought. Yet its contents are practically unknown to most Hindus. Most Hindus venerate it from a distance. The Vedas are made up of the Rig Veda, the Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. Hindus believe that the Vedas transcend all time and don't have a beginning or an end. The Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, 18 Puranas, Ramayana, and Mahabharata are also considered important texts in Hinduism. Hindus worship many gods and goddesses in addition to Brahman, who is believed to be the supreme god force present in all things. Hindu gods. Some of the most prominent deities include Brahma, the god responsible for the creation of the world and all living things; Vishnu, the god that preserves and protects the universe; Shiva, the god that destroys the universe in order to recreate it; Devi, the goddess that fights to restore dharma; Krishna, the god of compassion, tenderness, and love; Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and purity; Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Brahma, the creator. Associated with the Vedic creator god, Prajapati, whose identity he assumed, Brahma was born from a golden egg and created the earth and all things on it. Later myths describe him as having come forth from a lotus that issued from Vishnu's navel. In early Hindu sources such as the Mahabharata, Brahma is supreme in the triad of great Hindu gods, which includes Shiva and Vishnu. In later Puranas, or Hindu epics, Brahma is no longer worshipped and other gods are assigned his myths, even if he always maintains his status as the creator. By the 7th century, Brahma had largely lost his claim to being a supreme deity, although the Trimurti continued to figure importantly in both text and sculpture. Today, there is no sect that exclusively worships Brahma, and few temples are dedicated to him. Nevertheless, most temples dedicated to Shiva or Vishnu contain images of Brahma. In the beginning, Brahma sprang from the cosmic golden egg, and he then created good and evil, and light and dark from his own person. He also created the 4 types: gods, demons, ancestors, and men, the first being Manu. Brahma then made all living creatures upon the earth, although in some myths, Brahma's son Daksa is responsible for this. In the process of creating, perhaps in a moment of distraction, the demons were born from Brahma's thigh, and so he abandoned his own body which then became night. After Brahma created good, he abandoned his body once again, which then became day. Hence demons gained the ascendancy at night, and gods, the forces of goodness, rule the day. Vishnu, the preserver. Vishnu is the preserver in the Hindu triad or Trimurti that includes Brahma and Shiva. Vishnu combines many lesser divine figures and local heroes, chiefly through his avatars, particularly Rama and Krishna. His appearances are innumerable. He is often said to have 10 avatars, but not always the same 10. Among the 1,000 names of Vishnu, repeated as an act of devotion by his worshippers, are Vasudeva, Narayana, and Hari. A complex character, Vishnu is the preserver and guardian of men, Narayana. He protects the order of things, Dharma, and when necessary, he appears on earth in various incarnations or avatars to fight demons and fierce creatures and so maintain cosmic harmony. In the Bhagavata Purana, a collection of Vaishnavite stories, Vishnu is also credited with giving all the other gods the gift of immortality. The story goes that the gods wanted to churn up the ocean of milk in order to create the nectar, Amrita, which gave its drinker eternal life. To mix the ocean, they decided to use the holy Mount Mandara with the giant serpent Vasuki or Ananta as a turning rope, one end to be pulled by demons and the other by the gods. However, neither group could handle such a weight, and they called for Vishnu to hold it. This he did in the form of Kurma, the giant tortoise, supporting the mountain on his shell. The nectar was duly created from the foaming sea, but the demons, true to character, tried to make off with it. Fortunately, Vishnu interceded in the form of the beautiful Maya, the personification of illusion, and suitably distracted the demons, relinquished the nectar which Vishnu graciously gave to the gods, allowing them the possibility of immortality. Shiva, the destroyer. Shiva, in Sanskrit the auspicious one, also spelled Siva or Siva, one of the main deities of Hinduism, whom Shivites worship as a supreme god. Among his common epithets are Shambhu, meaning benign, Shankara, meaning beneficent, Mahesha, the great lord, and Mahadeva, the great god. Shiva is known as the destroyer within the Trimurti, the Hindu trinity that includes Brahma and Vishnu. Shiva is represented in a variety of forms, in a pacific mood with his consort Parvati and son Skanda, as the cosmic dancer Nataraja, as a naked ascetic, as a mendicant beggar, as a yogi, and as the androgynous union of Shiva and his consort in one body, half male and half female. Shiva is usually depicted in painting and sculpture as white, from the ashes of corpses that are smeared on his body, with a blue neck, from holding in his throat the poison that emerged at the churning of the cosmic ocean, which threatened to destroy the world. His hair arranged in a coil of matted locks, Jata Makuta, and adorned with crescent moon and the Ganges. According to legend, he brought the Ganges river to earth from the sky, where she is the Milky Way, by allowing the river to trickle through his hair, thus breaking her fall. Shiva has 3 eyes, the third eye bestowing inward vision but capable of burning destruction when focused outward. He wears a garland of skulls and a serpent around his neck and carries in his 2, sometimes 4 hands, a deerskin, a trident, a small hand drum, or a club with a skull at the end. That skull identifies Shiva as Kapalika, skull bearer, and refers to a time when he cut off the 5th head of Brahma. The head stuck to his hand until he reached Varanasi, now in Uttar Pradesh, India, a city sacred to Shiva. It then fell away, and a shrine for the cleansing of all sins, known as Kapala Mochana, the releasing of the skull, was later established in the place where it landed. Krishna, one of the most widely revered and most popular of all Indian divinities, worshipped as the 8th incarnation, avatar or avatara, of the Hindu god Vishnu, and also as a supreme god in his own right, Krishna became the focus of numerous bhakti or devotional cults, which have over the years produced a wealth of religious poetry, music, and painting. The basic sources of Krishna's mythology are the epic Mahabharata and its 5th century CE appendix, the Harivamsha, and the Puranas, particularly books 10 and 11 of Bhagavata Purana. They relate how Krishna, literally black or dark as a cloud, was born into the Yadava clan, the son of Vasudev and Devaki, who was a sister of Kamsa, the wicked king of Mathura. Kamsa, hearing a prophecy that he would be destroyed by Devaki's child, tried to slay her children, but Krishna was smuggled across the Yamuna river to Gokula, where he was raised by the leader of the cowherds, Nanda, and his wife Yashoda. The child Krishna was adored for his mischievous pranks. He also performed many miracles and slew demons. As a youth, the cowherd Krishna became renowned as a lover, the sound of his flute prompting the gopis, wives and daughters of the cowherds, to leave their homes to dance ecstatically with him in the moonlight. His favorite among them was the beautiful Radha. At length, Krishna and his brother Balarama returned to Mathura to slay the wicked Kamsa. The child Krishna, or Balakrishna, is depicted crawling on his hands and knees or dancing with joy, a ball of butter held in his hands. The divine lover, the most common representation, is shown playing the flute, surrounded by adoring gopis. In 17th and 18th century Rajasthani and Pahari painting, Krishna is characteristically depicted with blue or black skin, wearing a yellow dhoti or loincloth and a crown of peacock feathers. Lakshmi, the Hindu goddess of wealth and good fortune, is the wife of Vishnu. She is said to have taken different forms in order to be with him in each of his incarnations. Thus, when he was the dwarf Vamana, she appeared from a lotus and was known as Padma or Kamala, both of which mean lotus. When he was the axe-wielding Parashurama, the destroyer of the warrior class, she was his wife Dharani. When he was King Rama, she was his queen Sita. In the most widely received account of Lakshmi's birth, she rose from the churning of the ocean of milk, an important event in Hinduism, seated on a lotus and holding another blossom in her hand. Controversy arose between the gods and demons over possession of her. Lakshmi is often represented in sculpture, seated on a lotus, full-breasted, broad-hipped, beneficently smiling, and sometimes being lustrated by a pair of elephants, pouring water over her. Her vehicle is the white owl. She continues to be worshipped by modern Hindus, particularly in the home, every Friday and on regular festivals throughout the year, especially Diwali. Saraswati is the Hindu goddess of learning, wisdom, music, and aesthetics. She is also known as Bharati, eloquence, Shatarupa, existence, Vedamata, mother of the Vedas, Brahmi, Sarada, Vagisvari, and Putkari. As Vak, she is the goddess of speech. Saraswati first appears in the Rig Veda, and in later religious texts, she is identified as the inventor of Sanskrit, and appropriately gives Ganesha the gifts of pen and inks. She is also a patron of the arts and sciences and the wife of Brahma, even if the Bengal Vaishnavas considered her first the wife of Vishnu. Saraswati is also worshipped as the goddess of learning in Jainism and by some Buddhist sects. The Saraswati River, just like the Ganges River, flows from the Himalaya and is considered a sacred source of purification, fertility, and good fortune for those who bathe in her waters. The sacred river, again like the Ganges, then developed into a personified deity. The goddess has her own festivals, notably the Saraswati Puja, held on the first day of spring. During the festival, worshippers wear yellow, which is associated with wisdom and prosperity. Saraswati is also worshipped along with other major goddesses in the pan-Indian celebration of Navaratri. As the patron of music, she is frequently prayed to by musicians before concerts and as a goddess of intellectual pursuits by students before examinations. So, that's all for now. If you found this video useful, we would really love it if you could give it a thumbs up. Also, if you want to know more about this topic or similar areas, make sure to visit our website, which is www.firstratetutors.com. Thank you for listening.